Welcome to another episode of Conversations for Connection. We continue with our conversation with Fundi Yuba on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on our friendships. This is part 2. Friendships are so important. And some people have said this pandemic also exposed a lot of things in us that now you find that at home with the spouses, maybe people have more unnecessary fights. And there's been studies now shown that maybe divorce rates have gone up. And when you think of close relationships like that, when people are married, that's a very close relationship. Do you think maybe we'd be able to transfer some of the features of friendship into our marriages to forgive and, heal and understand?
I'm going to speak about my experiences growing up and then I'm going to bring it into what you're asking. So I grew up, I was raised by my my aunts, my uncles were at home, cousins would come, so we were in Port Elizabeth, so relatives from Kendane or wherever would come and maybe stay with my gran for a year or two. There was always people in the house. And I want to say, I think the reason my marriage did well, we did extremely well in COVID, is because my cousin in law was living with us. My nanny lives with us. So the social burden and needs weren't placed on one person who is my spouse. Because the reality of normal life is that your social needs and social interactions are met by a lot of people because
Yeah.
you've got colleagues, maybe you've got social groups. There's a lot of people that you're engaging with. But what COVID did was there's you, there's all your needs, there's one person who's supposed to meet those needs. And I don't know if that's a fair expectation. In English, they might say familiarity breeds contempt. And I think that's exactly what you're speaking about. Because even with our close friendships, they're not necessarily doing life with us 24/7. So when you're with your spouse, there's greater room for critique, there's greater room for seeing everything that they are doing wrong that isn't working for you. But I want to say extend grace to your spouse, but also realize that your spouse is not meant to fulfill the role of every other social relationship in your life.
Okay.
All of the people that you normally do life with, they matter. We can't
Matter.
have one person trying to fit and support everything. And that goes to your friends. You can't have that one friend that is your everything. And by everything, I mean they're your counselor, they're your this, they're your that. It's a heavy burden to place on one person, especially if that burden is not reciprocated.
Oh man, I love that. I love that. That's amazing, Fundi. I'm seeing here comments from Naheng. He loves that you're saying your spouse is not everything. And Tamaku is saying what he's learning about friendship in this pandemic season is actually to be more intentional. I think for me that really stands out. Being more intentional strengthens everything. Asanda as well is here and saying, I love what Fundi said about extending grace and being mindful of the seasons. And this is such a tough season for all of us. Oriman Savior from Nigeria says hello. Friendship, in my opinion, is being in the company of people whom you find have influence on your life, more especially during trying moments. More so, true friendship is that which is not built on conditions, but rather it is that which makes you feel safe, believing what is shared in confidence can never be betrayed. In essence, friendship is what transcends borders. Now I'm gonna go on to the VNs so that we can share what people have shared with us.
For me, COVID has taken away unnecessary pressure for me because trust me, COVID or not, the friends that do mean a lot to me, that I know I also mean a lot to. They've really stuck around. I've had those friends almost like COVID has been a separation of sorts, separating the bad from the good. So I have just been left with rich and meaningful friendships. People that I know would do anything for me. People that I know will pray for me in the midst of whatever it is that I'm faced with. So in a way, it has really, first of all, lessened the unnecessary pressure of me always having to be there for friends that I'm also like, if I don't know if you and I are in alignment. So it has just taken off that unnecessary pressure of me having to feel like I have to perform.
That brings another layer that I didn't think about. So people got to sit down and realize, and maybe had some pressure taken off. Hi, Tamagu. Thank you for being here.
Good evening, everybody. I'm in the medical profession. I've observed something that in terms of us, people that are in the front line and dealing with friendships, it has actually isolated us because sometimes, we have friends that have different views concerning COVID, concerning vaccines and so forth, and sometimes you get these messages on your phone and you feel as if, is this actually, some of those friendships, although they were not maybe deeper friendships, you feel as if, should we continue this friendship if we're going to be in disagreement with something that is quite life-threatening and people that are actually maybe spreading misinformation and actually even not understanding what we face in the front line. The pain, not only dealing with patients, but actually the psychological and the mental aspect of being in the front line and people making comments that are actually not helping.
Asanda says,
Yeah.
as an introvert, she was just comfortable with being away from people, which is different from me. I get a lot of joy from interacting with people, even if, as you say, we are just discussing nothing really specific. And Asanda is joining us. I want to hear more about that. Hi, Asanda.
Oh, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm really enjoying this conversation. Fundi, you are making so many insightful and deep points, about just extending grace to people. I always had an element of social anxiety. So for me, when I'm invited to a gathering, I must think, who am I going to talk to? What am I going to wear? What are they going to think of me? And then when I go and I start talking to people, then afterwards I ruminate. I'm like, oh, why did I say that? What did that person mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that comes with introversion, right? And just being over analytical. So cutting away social interaction has been a bliss to me. It has been it has been great. I'm so sorry for everyone, for all the extroverts in the world that are struggling right now. I feel I mean, California opened a couple of months ago. People can go, to restaurants and whatnot. I haven't. I still shop online. I
Wow.
still stay home. I don't even go to the shopping store. And I think it goes back to personality. I think the pandemic has allowed me to be a bit more authentic, being true to the fact that actually I don't gain as much as other people do from these interactions. And to be honest with myself that actually I prefer a deep conversation to small talk. There are people who can do small talk for days, but now I prefer, let's talk about your feelings, let's talk about your aspirations, let's talk about, the deep stuff. And that's just how I think, how I am wired. So, yes, you want to be at the funeral. Yes, you want to be there for major life issues. But when you are able to connect at a deeper level with your friends, for me, that outweighs just being part of the crowd at the funeral. Do you know what I mean? If I can call my friend who has lost a father and say, Chomi, let's talk about how the loss has affected you. Let's talk about your family relationships. I know that planning a funeral and e-will and, assets of the deceased can cause family drama. Let's talk about that. For me, that is much more valuable than just being a face at the funeral. I'm not sure if that makes sense. So I feel absolutely no guilt about not being able to be there. I just don't.
I love that, because as an extrovert, I would have never thought that someone enjoyed this total shutdown. I think that's why we're having this conversation, so that we can learn. Thank you so much, Asanda.
Sure. Thanks,
I
guys.
enjoyed that. Thanks, Asanda. I love what Asanda shared, in that it's allowed her to be authentic in how she engages and to be clear on settings that she enjoys so that she can show up as she fully is. And I think I'd like to encourage everyone to just appreciate that we are wired differently. Some people are feeling guilty, some people aren't feeling guilty. Some people enjoy big crowds, other people want to have a deep, intimate conversation with one person at a gathering, and that's enough for them. And I think in everything that we are experiencing, to just be mindful that how we are seeing the world isn't necessarily how the next person is seeing and experiencing the world. And the only way we can know what's happening with them is if we reach out. And just find out what's happening. How are you doing? What do you think of this? And to just seek to understand the other person. And we're not going to be friends with everyone, and that's okay. And we're not going to be friends with everyone at the same time in life, and that is also okay. Relationships shift, relationships move, we shift, we change, we move, and that is okay. And to be comfortable to amicably part if there's a time for parting, but leave room for you guys to reconnect at a later stage. I think for me, that's the biggest thing. The world we live in is getting increasingly smaller. I know someone who knows someone who knows you. Let's just make sure that if we are wounded or hurt, that we part ways in a loving manner. And for those people that we have in our lives, let's love them to the best of our abilities, because we don't know what tomorrow holds for us.
Thank you so much for Fundi for sharing your perspectives, and you've just empowered us in a way that even I'm walking away from this having learned different things, and will look at my friendships differently and be gracious and bring my best, the best of me, to every relationship for every season. And as Hussein was saying, great conversations and powerful messages. Interesting to hear different perspectives with all the similarities and insights. Thank you all for sharing. Once again, I would like to say thank you to everyone who joined us. Thank you for your time. What I'm taking from here: be gracious, be intentional, and friendship, again, is not a transaction, but an experience through all the seasons that we have. Thank you so much, Fundi, for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Mzi, and thanks to everyone who was so patient with us today. It's been a good conversation.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Conversations for Connection. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Our page is Conversations for Connection. Till next time, goodbye.